What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the first edition of 2025 SSPN offseason. Ethan, I know. A couple weeks ago we did a recaps episode where it was basically kind of talking about the offseason, but it was really more recapping the season. Doing the player breakdowns and everything. But now we're getting close to the end of the first round. And it's just all Spurs offseason talk with all of the different talking points that we'll get into today. As you guys can see in the title, obviously, like we said last week, Tre Johnson and Kasparas. Man, dude, I listened to his pronunciation all day at work, and now I feel like I'm forgetting about it. I think it's Jakucionis.
I think it's Jakucionis as well, yeah. I also blanked. Like, I was waiting for you to say the last name, and then I had like a moment of panic where I was like, "Oh God!" I just watched it too. That's funny.
For sure, for sure. That was kind of how I felt because I was watching highlights at work as well to like kind of keep reminding myself of it. But another thing that's kind of funny about those pronunciations, last episode when we were talking about Igor, you were like, let's just stick to the first name. And honestly, I'm kind of, that does kind of make things a lot easier. We can go with Tre
It
and
does.
Kasparas, and then we
Yep.
don't have any issues.
Yeah, it's like those lawyer documents where it's like Kasparas Jakucionis from this point forward known as Kasparas. That's what we're gonna do.
Exactly, exactly. But we do have a couple different topics today, Ethan. The first thing that we're going to talk about, you guys also see this in the title, and, we're probably the last people that usually talk about this type of stuff when it comes to a blockbuster trade or making a big move. But obviously, as we've been talking about the past 2 years, this season at nauseum, even in the few, kind of the end of the years, we've really shifted our focus toward the offseason. We've talked about it at nauseum. And that's the fact that the Spurs are in a very good position whenever it comes to assets, draft picks, and of course, having Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, and De'Aaron Fox on top of the other guys that we've talked about. But they are in a position where they can go make a move like that, still keep some of their young talent, and really push to that next step. So I say all this to say, as Winky is in the background, invading, making himself known. We've talked
Yes.
about Kevin Durant. That has been a name that has shown up kind of in Spurs circles for a while here.
Mhm.
But that's not the name I'm going to bring up today. And I do think that is something to keep an eye on because obviously he does want out of Phoenix, it seems like for sure, going into this offseason. But there's a playoff series going on right now, Ethan, in the Eastern Conference. I believe the Indiana Pacers, are they up 3-1 now or 3-0?
3-1.
3-1. That's what I thought. Yeah. Damian Lillard, unfortunately, man, prayers to Damian Lillard, man. Torn Achilles. And I'm not saying that's going to be the deciding factor here. I think regardless of Dame's injury, with the way that this season went, with the way that the last season went, I think there's going to be some real questions around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Obviously, that is a giant thing to say, Ethan, to bring in should the Spurs go after Giannis Antetokounmpo if he were to come available. And this is such like a, 2K type scenario type deal. But if we go to Giannis's history, and it's not just Coach Bud, it's, his European history, as well as one interview that sticks out in my head, Ethan, where he's like, I want to be like Tim Duncan when I
Right.
retire. Where the hell is Tim Duncan? And, you know, I think there's definitely some parallels with Giannis's personality, not necessarily to Timmy, but just to a Spurs player, who maybe, as much as he is an all-star, he's not like, even, well, I say this, I was going to say he's not on like the fashion week or anything I was going to say, but Wemby did that, but he kind of still did it in like a more subtle way. He's not, on all these different media appearances, you know what I mean? He's not necessarily the most broadcasted star as much as he is one of the best players in the league in the NBA. Like if you think about a Luka Doncic to LeBron James, even SGA has really got more attention. I feel like I hear a little bit more about Jokic even than I do Giannis. And a lot of that is circumstantial because of just the way that the past 2 seasons have gone for Milwaukee. But again, I say all this to say he's not the big glitz and glamour guy. I think his personality would fit an SA. But again, Ethan, this is such. I want to bring it up because I think it's a realistic thing if Giannis does one out. But also, there's a lot that comes with that if we were to make this decision. I know I just threw a ton at you there. I'm going to talk for like 5 minutes about all that, but let me know your thoughts on all of that there and just the potential of Giannis and maybe making a crazy super team with him and Victor.
I'm getting major deja vu, Jude, because we had this exact same conversation the year prior to Giannis winning his first championship with Milwaukee. Like there were a lot of rumors about, hey, they haven't won it yet. Is he happy there? And then right before they got rid of Bud, they traded for Drew Holiday. Chris Middleton kind of elevated his game, and then they won a championship. Now, fast forward, 3-4 years later, and we're kind of back at that same point with the Milwaukee Bucks, where they're about to lose in the first round. Um, I'm still holding. I need to see Giannis say something like to that extent, because I don't think he's ever, other than maybe right
Yeah.
before the Dame trade, I don't think he's ever threatened like, I want out of Milwaukee, or if this doesn't happen, then I'm going to want out of Milwaukee. So I'm gonna hold off until something like that comes out of Milwaukee before I make any declarative statements. But as far as would I want him on the team, yes, but I don't want to give up too much, because I feel like Milwaukee would want like literally all of our draft capital, plus guys like Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and probably Jeremy Sohan.
Yep.
And I'm sure they'd try and squeeze Stephon Castle out of us.
Yep.
Obviously, we're not going to let that happen. But if it came down to it, Jude, and I'm just going to throw random stuff, and it was Devin, Keldon, Jeremy, plus like 3 or 4 first round picks, I think I have to say no, because I feel like that's just way too much
Interesting.
too soon. But I do agree with all of your statements about him being a Spurs type player. Therefore, if he really does want out of Milwaukee and he wants to come to San Antonio, maybe this is the big guy that we can play later on in free agency when that comes up. I don't want to give up all of our draft capital right now. I still feel like it's too soon to do that.
I think the big point that you're hitting on there is flexibility for Victor's future, because we
Right.
still got to pay him. Will we be able to afford to pay him and Giannis? I mean, I don't know, dude. Those are giant contracts.
For
And we've
sure.
talked about how, Victor's contract is probably going to be the biggest contract ever. Giannis's next extension, especially, if he's playing with Victor, I mean, he's going to demand money, maybe not as much, but still, he's Giannis.
Yep. Then we got Stephon coming, and we got 2 first round picks this year coming as well. It's just it starts piling up.
It would 100% be a win now move, and I don't think that it would necessarily close our championship window that much long term, because let me just double check before I talk out of my behind here. But how old is Giannis? I don't think he's that old. He is just 30.
Okay.
So he has just turned 30 last December. So that's a little bit older than I thought. I thought he was 28, 29 still. So, you can ask yourself that question too. How much of Giannis's prime is left? And if you want to think of it in a very, negative way, I hate to put it this way, but like in a way where you're like, okay, it's not going to last that long. Like you could say 4 to 5 years, max, you're going to get like this version of Giannis on top of his play style. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm kind of talking out loud and thinking out loud as I'm looking at his age. And I know it's like, okay, if it was 29 or 28, is that really that big of a difference? No, not necessarily, but it is 1 or 2 more years. So that's another thing to think about as well, because again, Jeremy Sohan, still only 21 years old. Like, how good are Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, and Jeremy Sohan going to be in 3 to 4 years? If you want to make the argument that Keldon and Devin will be the same, I'm not going to get that mad at that. But I think to say that Jeremy Sohan's not going to be substantially improved in 4 years is just false in my opinion. So yeah, now again, not saying that any of those guys are going to be the level of player of Giannis. So there's a lot of things to juggle and think about here. But I do think that the biggest counter argument, like you said, Ethan, is that going to deter our flexibility for Victor long term too much? I mean, look at what Oklahoma City has been doing in the way that they've built out their team, and how even with all of these stars they have right now, they still have picks set up for the future. There's still a chance this year where they could get the 76ers pick, depending on how the lottery goes. So that kind of does seem a little bit more attractive to me. But I mean, like, if Giannis is like, I want to come to San Antonio and team up with Wemby and win a championship, that's a dilemma. It's a discussion for sure.
100%. And I will say that point that you made, like Jeremy, Devin, Keldon combined, like there has to be a way to kind of measure wins added from having those 3 versus wins added with Giannis. And if we get rid of those 3 and we add Giannis to this team tomorrow, are we in a place where we're going to immediately be championship contenders, dude, with Giannis, De'Aaron, and Wemby?
I would think so. I would like to think so, but I'm wondering if I'm being too biased as a Spurs fan saying yes to that.
I just don't know if we have any depth, and you could argue,
Right.
we could find some veteran minimums, some mid level exceptions in free agency, then like for sure. And despite Giannis's contract being high, like we are getting rid of Devin and Keldon, who basically would equate to whatever Giannis is making. So maybe we do have more free agent, more money than I'm anticipating. But it just makes me nervous when you start adding in 3 to 4 first round picks to that as well. And it's not like a guarantee. I feel like that we would immediately be championship contenders.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable with something like along those lines. And obviously this would be favorable to the Spurs. So I'm not mad if like Bucks fans or NBA fans see this and are like, I would never do that. But as a Spurs fan, if we're going to give up those three guys, I think I'm giving up like one pick max,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Or if we're giving up both picks, let's try and keep Jeremy.
Yeah, right.
You know?
It's got to be one or the other. I'm 100% with you. It's funny you mentioned that because I was talking with one of my buddies about this, and that's kind of what sparked this whole idea. And when we were talking about who we would give up, that was kind of the point I made. I was like, oh man, I mean, if it's Giannis, I think I'd be willing to do it, but I'd really like to keep Jeremy if we can, because we just forget. Like again, dude, he's turning 22 next month. Like this guy,
Mm-hmm.
I really think Jeremy is just scratching the surface of what he's going to be in the NBA.
For those three guys, I agree. If we could do one and maybe like a pick swap, I think
Uh-huh.
I think I pull the trigger, Jude. I think I do. But like I said, this is all just like conjecture because he's never said anything, recently at least, that would lead us to believe that he wants out.
This is all completely hypothetical,
Yeah.
but I think, if the Bucks lose 2 years in a row, I think it's a reasonable conversation to have in round one specifically.
I'm actually going to look. When does his contract end?
Good point, Ethan. Good catch.
He technically has a player option the summer of
Oh, wow.
27-28. After 2027, he could opt out and be available. But he's supposed to make 62 million in that year. So I doubt he will say no to that
Yeah.
money.
Even if he wants to trade, he'll accept the option. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of money.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on this whole potential Giannis situation. Again, this is not us saying the Spurs are definitely going to do this or this is for sure a real possibility. But I think these stars that are going to be on the trade block, it's something that we got to monitor now with the Spurs being in the position that they're in.
100%.
All righty. Well, that will go ahead and get us into our prospect breakdowns, Ethan. So the first guy that we're going to talk about today is Texas two-guard Tre Johnson, Ethan. While I pull up some of his stuff, I'm going to dish it to you. Give me your thoughts on what you've seen from Tre, some of the things that are appealing to you about him, and just all of the things that you took away from your research that you have done on him.
That he is an effortless scorer. I think that's the best way to describe him. This guy puts in very little effort to get some of the toughest buckets that you've seen, and at no point does it look like he's struggling. He averaged 20 for UT last year. Defensively, leaves a lot to be desired. That's not his side of the ball. But he is 6'6". Like, he's not incapable physically to be a defender. He just doesn't play defense. That's just not his specialty. He is an offensive-minded guy. So to me, where he fits with the Spurs would be immediately an improved version of what we wanted Malachi to be off the bench. He is going to get you buckets on buckets on buckets, and he will be a microwave for us in the same way that Jordan Clarkson was, Lou Williams was. And I wouldn't compare him to Manu in the same way because I don't think he has the same playmaking ability as a Manu Ginobili, but he's going to really run up the scoreboard on the second unit guys and make a lot of tough baskets off the dribble, Jude.
I had not thought of the Manu shades. I know it's not the exact same thing, but I just had not thought of that today. I came up with some other names that I'll get into here in a second, man. But I'm really liking that. Like, I didn't think of him in that mold, but there's a lot of things that he does, dude, that are similar to Manu. And here's what I'll say. I know you see 2.7 assists. It doesn't stand out. Y'all go check out No Ceilings recent video that they did on Tre Johnson. It's Tyler Metcalf's film school, okay? He gives some context to kind of just the Texas offense, some of the roster and their shooting percentages, as well as just, while he has highlights of Tre Johnson's playmaking kind of going on throughout the time. He talks about the rest of him as well, the rest of his game, in the rest of the video on top of his defense. And of course, the shot making, like you said. But I think there's a little bit more to his playmaking than people realize. And I totally understand why when you look at the assist numbers you just don't really think too much of it. And then obviously when you watch him, the thing that stands out is his shot creation ability, right? Think about, I talked about Rob Dillingham last year. I mean, he might even have a deeper bag than Rob does, on
I
top of the
think
fact.
so.
I agree. Yeah. And on top of the fact that he's 6'6", that just allows for some more athleticism and things that he can do, with his bag. But to get back to his playmaking, if you go watch that video, man, you will see, first of all, you'll see a ton of kind of acrobatic assists under the rim. But the key context, man, he plays like 15 minutes, dude, 10 to 15 minutes of Texas dudes missing open shots that he passed.
Hmm.
And but he has a big caveat, Ethan. He's like, I'm not saying that Tre Johnson's going to be a point guard. I'm not saying that he's going to be, a primary ball handler. But he does think that his playmaking, the narrative about his playmaking is a little bit misconstrued, because Texas, like his teammates' shooting percentages, again, I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but he was not getting all of the help that he possibly could have. Like on an NBA roster where he's got more reliable shooters on the perimeter, he might have higher assist numbers. And the crazy thing is because of that, Ethan, because of the fact that he didn't have that great shooters around him, he got honed in on more, and he still, was pretty efficient and averaged 20 points. So I think that's another thing that kind of ties into just his scoring ability. He was, double teamed most games, and he still was able to do this. So again, that goes back to all the shot creation stuff, like you said. But I'll read off some bullet points that I wrote down about him. A lot of it's similar to what you said. Bucket getter, separation creator. He has playmaking flashes that I kind of just went over, as well as just the context of his teammates missing shots as well. His athleticism jumps off the screen. That's one of the things that I noticed.
Hmm.
Overall, not the greatest defender. But what I will say, one thing that he was able to do, like semi-consistently, as much as the on-ball defense definitely needs some work, was you see the 31 steals down there? A lot of those are in passing lanes. He was able to read guys. It wasn't like he was pickpocketing guys. Like he was like catching it like he was a receiver and the other team was a quarterback. I saw that a lot on his highlight tape. Again, not to say that, not coming out here saying he's an above average or elite defender, but just saying there are some tools, and he does have some good pass vision on defense. I mean, as well as on offense a little bit too. But the last couple things I'll say: plays on his toes. He's not flat-footed, very bouncy. That's something I noticed on offense and defense. And here were my comparisons. I really like the Manu one, like I said, but mine were Cam Thomas, obviously like a 6'6" Cam Thomas, Austin Reeves, and believe it or not, Devin Vassell.
Devin Vassell. I just thought of another one that I want to bring up too, to add on to yours. Jamal Crawford.
Yeah.
Just leave it at that.
That's very good, because that ties into the playmaking thing in the sense that he's not necessarily a point guard, but he definitely can feed guys.
He's just bouncy with it.
Uh-huh.
He has that ball on a string. Now his handles aren't necessarily exactly like Jamal's.
Right.
But he could probably get to close to that level.
Well, bro, get Wemby to call up Jamal if we draft him. Let's get him in.
That's right. Maybe I'm trying to shoehorn him into that position too quickly, of like the 6-man. But I also think that he has the ability to be a starting caliber player. Don't get me wrong. I think he has that because he shoots 40% as well. So he plays well without the basketball at the same time. But I think that's where his specialty would be, immediately after drafting him.
And also, you're kind of talking about it in the context of the Spurs as well.
For sure.
But honestly, dude, I was kind of, because he is a top 10 guy and, he does have a lot of potential, I'm kind of thinking of him as a starter, not next season, obviously, but, just like long-term, I think he is that caliber of player. But again, man, when you made the Manu comparison, he was a starting caliber player. And anyways, I don't know if that would be anything that Tre Johnson would be interested in. He's a Dallas guy, but he is a Texas guy. I don't know if he's a Spurs fan or a Mavs fan or what he grew up on, but I could see him in that 6th-man role, man. I really could see him as just our microwave 6-man scorer. And the more you're talking about it, the more I'm liking it and liking the vision. And that's making me bring this up again, as we do every episode, it feels like now. Let me bring up the roster outlook. So in this situation, he's going to be let's say he's going to be the backup 2, just for the sake of conversation. Maybe there's a world where he competes with Blake Wesley to be the point guard, but I do think he's more of a 2, as much as he can be a combo guard type player. So we'll have him at that backup 2, move Devin to the starting 3, move Harrison to the backup 4. And again, that just leaves that backup center position, Ethan. And we'll get into this when we talk about Kasparas as well. But to go on a little bit of a side note here, when I look at it, well, here, let me preface. If Malwatch does not fall to 8, 9, wherever our pick ends up being, I think that we should go for a guard in the top 10 because I just feel like, that's where the highest value is. And here's the thing, man, I really feel confident. One, we could trade back or go trade for a center, or there are some names in free agency. I don't know if we want to pay big bucks for like a Miles Turner or something. But at 14, I'm pretty sure Danny Wolf and Thomas Sorber are going to be there, like for sure. And they might even be there a little bit later if we want to trade back. So I just feel like we're definite, like the guys that we would be eyeing other than Malwatch are, for backup center, for that to be addressed, are going to be available at our next pick.
For sure.
So that makes me feel like this 8th pick, I want to go with probably one of these guards that's down here, or even a Khan, and he's, you could call him a guard wing, but still one of those guys.
Luckily, Jude, I've really liked all these guys that we've talked about as potential guard/wings at 8 or 9. So I'll be pleased no matter who it is that we bring in, to be completely frank and honest with you.
This is reminding me of last year, when Lou was telling us that next year's draft was like so much better.
Oh, yeah. There's like no, knock on wood. So far, there's been no like,
yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. There's been
There's
no
no
deadbeats amongst the crowd.
there's no like question marks, And
Yeah.
this is kind of a good transition. Any final thoughts on Tre Johnson?
No, sir.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on. So, one of the guys that was the biggest question marks last year, Ethan, for us, as much as we did kind of believe in his potential, was Nikola Topic. Okay.
Yeah.
Kasparas, dude, he's literally Nikola Topic if you put him in the Big Ten for instead of playing in the Adriatic League. And then you also brought him to the Nike Hoop Summit in 2024 to play against all the best high school talent. And he played in Barcelona, as much as he didn't play that much, and he mainly played on the B team. In his last season before this one, he did play 3 games in the Euro League and averaged 7 points. But obviously, again, with all of those question marks sometimes that we have, we're not trying to completely dismiss foreign leagues. They're playing against adults for sure, but kind of like last episode, we talked about Carter Bryant versus Noah Esengi or Nolan Traore versus Jace Richardson. Maybe these guys will be proven long term. And also the other thing I'll say about Nolan Traore and Esengi, I'm definitely still open to those guys, obviously because of the French connection, as well as, all of the other European talent that has been showing out. But still, if we're looking over history, guys who've played, in Power 5 basketball have consistently kind of shown a little bit more just when it comes to numbers. Again, I know there's Giannis, I know there's Jokic, I know there's Wemby. Like, I'm not completely dismissing all of the foreign players. But again, historically, let's go back to Hakeem Olajuwon. He played at Houston,
Right.
But anyways, that's my rant there. The point is, Kasparas Jakucionis has no questions about his level of competition, and he's played diverse levels of skill sets against European basketball and American basketball. What were your thoughts on Kasparas?
In terms of the Swiss Army knife versatile players that we've looked at, Jude, he's my favorite in this draft. He's a guy that does a little bit of everything. He's not extremely athletic, but he's still, quick enough, has a nice first step, plays really well in the pick and roll. I think they list him at like the 2 guard, but he's really a point guard. Now, he averages 15, 6, and 5, like you see on your screen, but he's a really, really talented playmaker, fantastic patience. I know he averages close to 4 turnovers a game, but he has the vision there, and he kind of gives me a little bit of Stefan Castle playmaking, where it's like when he hits the right pass, it is mesmerizing, like the angles that he's able to see and deliver dimes through. But he also, he gets a little carried away sometimes, and that's can get him into trouble. He only shoots 32% from 3, Jude, but I love his jump shot. He's
Me
got one of the
too.
prettiest jump shots I've seen in this draft, and he's a set shooter. He's not like it's always a consistent form, and he can shoot off the dribble. He can also shoot just standing still. So he gives me glimpses of Topic too, like you said, but I think he has a real shot at like at first being an off guard for the Spurs and just a really good playmaker as an off guard as well, but eventually could be kind of a backup point guard for us. You know what? That could be where we slot him next year if Blake Wesley doesn't pan out
Right.
as the primary playmaker for us in that second unit.
Kasparas has that versatility, man. Like you said,
Mhm.
if Blake does work out, then we can play him at the backup too, move Devin to the starting lineup. Same formula where we move Harrison to the backup four, or start Harrison and move Jeremy to the backup four. But dude, he definitely would address that whether it's the backup two or the backup one.
Mhm.
I really think he would, man. Honestly, the first thing I have written down, Ethan, he's my favorite player I've watched this year.
Really? Yeah,
Out
yeah.
of
I
all
I
of our
get it
prospects, out of all of our prospects, he's my favorite. Tre Johnson is more athletic than him. I'll say that right now.
for sure.
But Kasparas is my favorite player out of all the guys we've watched. I know Mal Watch is probably like who I would say is number one on my Spurs big board just because of need, but he's my number two as of right now. Um, he can create off the dribble, whether that's a blow by or a step back. He can score at all three levels. You saw him hitting fadeaway jumpers, in long twos. You saw a little shorter twos. Then you also see the threes, whether it's catch and shoot or off the dribble. What I will say from what I was looking at today, it seems like his off the dribble shooting percentages are a little bit higher than the catch and shoot. And I was listening to another podcast today, and I thought they made a good point on this. They said, and I believe this was Corey Tulaba, also from No Ceilings, and he said that Kasparas is more of a shot creator than like a pure shooter. And I definitely got that. But also, I see what you're saying too. Like, yeah, the percentage isn't that great, but dude, you go watch his jumper. Like,
Beautiful.
go watch the Kentucky game in March Madness, and he's got range too. It's not like
Mhm.
he's just these are little corner threes. Like he's pulling up with confidence from deep. Um, Again, another appeal, dude. Only one dunk this season, so that ties into the athleticism, but I don't really think that's his game. And that's another reason kind of why I made the Topic comparison. But again, really good vision. He has a ton of court awareness. Like if he's coming off the right wing, let's just say in a pick and roll, or excuse me, the left wing in a pick and roll, and he's like coming up, near the free throw line, or like the top of the key is probably the better way to put it. If he's, dribbling off that pick and roll, if he sees he's got the wide open space, he'll stop, set his feet, pull up from three, splash. If he sees there's a lane driving inside, he'll just go and blow by guys, and maybe he'll have to do a little up and under, but he'll finish at the rim with smoothness, even if it's through traffic or if there's a wide open lane and guys catch up late. Um, or maybe he'll, dribble out to the elbow, make a stop, throw a pass to the corner in the left wing. That's just one scenario, that I kind of saw today. But the reason I bring all that up, again, high IQ, court awareness, he always has multiple different options when he has the ball in his hands. He's never zeroed in on one thing.
Mm. Yeah, not to compare every really good playmaking white guy to Luca.
No, but I see it.
There are some aspects to his game that are Luca-ish. I think of like he has really really solid control at the rim, like you were talking about. Fantastic footwork in the post. I don't think that's been a go-to for him in college based on what I saw, but I think that's an area of his game that will likely grow where we can take advantage of his 6'6" size on smaller mismatches. And he also has that stop and go Stephon Castle hesitancy
Yes.
at the rim. Like that's already a part of his game too. So I understand the folks that aren't high on this guy because of athleticism, defense. He doesn't exactly explode off the screen, but if you watch the footage, like he's taken advantage of a lot of opportunities, and he has a really really wide skill set, Jude, for sure.
Yeah. And I know we've harped on how the SEC was the best conference this year, but the Big Ten is no joke. I mean, think of all the basketball powerhouses that come through the Big Ten, whether that be Michigan State, Purdue. Obviously, Illinois had a really good year last year as well,
Hmm.
so played for a good program with them. I'm probably forgetting some other names in there in the Big Ten. Our guy Malachi Branham, Ohio State's in there. They're not necessarily as much of a basketball powerhouse. Michigan was who I
Oh
was
yeah.
forgetting. I knew I was forgetting a big one there. Um, but man, I'm getting a little bit off track here with where exactly we were at. But just to get back to Kasparas, the fundamentals jump off the screen. And as much as you were kind of saying, like, while the athleticism may not be the craziest thing, when it comes to his play style, it's not necessarily something that he needs to impose himself on. And because he's so crafty, that allows him to mitigate whatever he's so crafty and skilled, it mitigates any athletic lapses. But I would still say he's speedy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, not the only one dunk this season, not going to be a big vertical guy, or somebody who's necessarily going to, like if we compare him to Stephon, as much as like there are some play style and positional similarities, they're also very different physical specimens. But I did see what you were getting at there for sure. I was making that point more to just say like they're similar, but like Kasparas is like, a less athletic version of that. But the last thing I'll say about him, like I said, FC Barcelona, Nike Hoop Summit. The other thing I forgot to mention in 2022 in the FIBA U16 Euro Cup, so it's all of Europe. It wasn't the United States, but still all of Europe. Lithuania did win gold, and he was on that team. So I think he was a big part of that. Got to give him credit there. Beat other teams like France and stuff like that. I don't think he was in Wemby's age group, but still, there's a lot of European talent. As much as I was saying that, I do feel like a lot of the U.S. college guys, are a little bit more of a sure thing. But that's, I think, why you're seeing a lot more of these European guys come over and play college ball, like Maxime Radford, I believe is his name, the center from Stanford, among others. But last thing on Kasparas, Ethan, here's some player comps I got for you. So it's I mentioned Nikola Topic. The other two names I'm going to bring up don't necessarily, well, one plays his position, but isn't really a point guard, and the other is more of a wing, but it's more in play style than like size, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I came up with Franz Wagner and Bogdan Bogdanovic. And if you've been watching that Celtics Boston series, you could kind of say that Franz's step back is a little bit slow. Do you know what I'm saying?
It is, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think but again, it's very fundamental. It goes in, he swishes a lot of them, but I think that ties into kind of just that European, style of dribbling. Like that's why I noticed the Topic comparison, because they're just more tight, like I said, and fundamental. Where you look at Tre, you got the Jamal Crawford, Allen Iverson type stuff.
Yeah, I like those. I'm going to add one more that I just thought of. Josh Giddey coming out of Australia when he was in the draft.
I can see that too. Obviously, he's a little bit smaller than him, but still, like in play style, 100%. And yeah, do want to harp on some negatives though. Like you said, Ethan, you mentioned sometimes he can get a little bit carried away. Did average 3.7 turnovers per game. Had multiple 5 turnover games this season. But again, in all of those games, he also did a lot of good things. And I really think, Ethan, I'm not saying that there's not going to still be that issue when he gets to the league, but I really think that was an adjustment to American basketball, because a lot of those, it was like he thought a guy was going to be in one place, you know what I mean? And probably if he was playing in Europe, they would have moved there. And then, the ball goes straight into the stands because they didn't rotate the way that he thought they would. So yeah, that is one thing if I had to harp on some negatives. Another thing I'll say, I really like his on-ball defense in comparison to Tre. Like I would say from what I saw, I think Kasparas is a better on-ball defender than Tre Johnson. But I did think it was interesting, if you notice here in the totals, Ethan, he actually had less blocks and steals, as much as it was only 2 less, or 1 less block and 2 less steals from Tre Johnson. So they're basically exactly the same. But he did have less of those. But still, I would say what I saw on-ball was a little bit better. Now, maybe I'm just a little bit ignorant of all of his defense, but that's kind of my read on it. If you guys in the comments, if you guys saw some specific moments where Kasparas kind of got worked a little bit, pointed out to me. But as much as you can do that, I'm remembering a possession that I watched of Tre Johnson where he basically stood up Jeremiah Fears, who's one of the best scorers in this year's draft from Oklahoma. Again, that's not me saying that Tre Johnson is an elite defender, but it kind of goes back to the Rob Dillingham conversation last year about his defense. You can find little things here and there, but what is the overall, whole on average? And I would say, I think Kasparas is just a little bit of a tick more than Tre on defense. But then again, there are some athleticism things as well. But I saw him kind of putting ball pressure on guys in a couple clips I watched.
I think that's more than fair.
Okay, Ethan. Since we talked about these guys, and they're probably going to be in the same range, if they're both on the board, what would you do?
That's a really tough question, Jude. I think I go Tre Johnson.
Interesting. Okay, we're going to have our first disagreement of the cycle, Ethan. But again, when I say that, I'm not mad at Tre Johnson at all. And here's one of the things me and my buddies were talking about. Here's what I'll say. I was talking with a friend about this today. I think that there's a chance that Tre Johnson, because of his athleticism, if he can put everything together, like if he can learn the things that Kasparas is already doing, which I think a lot of that kind of comes from his European background, I think he can have a higher ceiling than Kasparas. Now, with that being said, I also think Kasparas has a higher floor than Tre Johnson.
Yeah. They both have like a weird level of high bust and high boom potential, which is what makes it kind of a difficult decision in my eyes. Because Kasparas could easily become a guy that almost never cracks a rotation because it's just like, that those guys exist. They happen every year. And then Tre Johnson could be a guy that like Malachi, where it's like every once in a while he'll have 25 points, and then most of the time his efficiency numbers are like 32% from the field, right? So it could go both ways. Makes it a very difficult decision.
For sure. But let's go ahead and wrap it all up with a mock draft, Ethan. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's sim this lottery. Okay, we got 14. Uh-oh, we jumped up, Ethan. Oh!
No way.
No, we have to do this one.
All right, let's do it.
One. We definitely do. I know I say the other ones aren't that realistic, but let's just do it for the Spurs fan people. It had to happen. Okay, wow. Well, this is easy. This makes things easy, but definitely interesting. If the Adam Silver rig comes in, Ethan, we will draft Cooper Flagg and become a dynasty.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
We will now have 4 All-Stars. This would be the greatest thing ever.
That's just the dream.
So let's talk about lineups in that situation, as much as it's probably unrealistic. Let me see here. What would that look like?
We'd have Cooper at the 4, I guess, right?
That's what I'd do. I'd immediately start Cooper and just move Jeremy to the bench. I love you, Jeremy, but that also kind of solves the backup front court. Obviously we'd still need another center, but having Jeremy next to somebody would help a lot with the physicality off the bench on the interior.
There's your boy Jeremiah Fears too. He dropped down all the way to 14.
And that's interesting too, especially because we drafted Cooper Flagg, Ethan, because if this happened, there's a center out there that's going to want to come play for us.
Oh, yeah.
And Jeremiah Fears, man, I feel like if he falls to this situation, this is definitely like a total, like I think even if we get the first pick, I doubt Jeremiah Fears falls here. So this is really like a dream scenario. But that's who I want to go with here. I feel like that's a no-brainer. I love Jace Richardson and Nolan Traore. Yeah,
I think so too. Jeremiah Fears.
Okay, let's just say though, for the sake of conversation, if he didn't fall, who would you be eyeing?
Jace Richardson for sure. You also have Thomas Sorber down there, but I think that's probably a reach. Carter Bryant. I really like Carter Bryant. There's my boy Danny Wolf. I just feel like all those guys, if those are the players that the Spurs want, you got to trade back at this point.
I feel you 100%. But with all that being said, Ethan, here, I'm losing track of my pages here. Where is our mock draft? Oh, here it is. All right, let's go with Jeremiah Fears, man. So that will go ahead and shore up the backup point guard or shooting guard position. Well, I think in this situation, we'd probably immediately put him at point guard because Devin's going to be coming off the bench here. Oh my gosh, dude. Now I feel like we're the Thunder.
Honestly,
if Keldon, Jeremy, and Devin are coming off the bench, we're the Thunder 2.0. No disrespect to the Thunder because I know we got a lot of work to do, but that's just my biased Spurs fan opinion.
Who's the big man that I was looking at, or we were both looking at last time that I really liked? That's a second rounder.
Oh, Ryan Kalkbrenner.
Yeah, Kalkbrenner. Let's get Kalkbrenner at 34 if he's available. Come on, baby.
I bet you he's going to be here.
I'm sure he is. Oh, that's my man.
Kalkbrenner, Connect, and Khan.
Yeah.
That was the draft last time. Man. Alrighty. Let's see the available options. Well, we already got homeboy Jeremiah Fears. Walter Clayton Jr. would be a great pick here. Like you said, JT Toppin's probably going back to Texas Tech.
Yep.
Yaxel's going back to Texas Tech. Yeah, we got Joan Berenger and Ryan Kalkbrenner. Ethan, what you thinking?
Hey man, I love myself some Kalkbrenner, but
okay, I think for this one, just to mix it up, since we kind of tried to mix it up, in the past we've gone Rocco, we went Kalkbrenner. Let's go Joan Berenger. You down with that?
I guess.
Nah, I guess. Let me. I actually did some more research on him. So crazy thing, he like just started playing basketball, like
You gotta draft those guys.
2 or 3 years ago. Right, exactly. No, 2 or 3 years ago. But dude, in the league that he's playing in, as much as I don't even remember which league he's in. I don't think it's a European league. It's one of them. He is like, when I was actually watching like some real tape and looking at some of the rosters that he was playing, which do consist of some former NBA players, I actually think there's a good bit of potential here. And I kind of see why they made the Malwatch comparison, because Malwatch actually only started playing basketball when he was like 13. So they feel like Joan could maybe, he's obviously a little bit behind him, but in like 2 years, he could really be like a super crazy athletic run, jump, and dunk center. And that's kind of what I saw from him. Definitely a flyer, you know what I mean? Probably will be a two-way guy this season. But I do think there's a potential that he could, really turn into one of the more athletic backup centers in the NBA.
I like it. It has the Jude seal of approval, so he has mine as well.
There's like a five. I don't know. Maybe Joan Berenger doesn't work out too, but that's kind of my outlook for him. But lots of potential to grow. Only 18 years old, and is also just a center and above 6'10".
Right, we'll take it.
We'll go ahead and wrap this draft up here. And we'll look at it in its glory, because if this happens, Ethan, this is why we do. Or go ahead.
I was gonna say, if my guy Kalkbrenner to Magic, gosh, I'll trade whatever you want for him.
You'll trade Joan Berenger.
I'll trade you Joan Berenger in next year's first.
There you go. Well, this like I said, this would totally be a dream scenario here, and it would be like not only just Cooper, but Jeremiah Fears too. Like
Wild.
That almost, like the Cooper thing, us getting the number one pick seems more realistic, than both of those things happening. But this kind of brings in another question, Ethan. If this were to happen, let's just say, that we get blessed again, Adam Silver rig, Wemby's second star. Do we even want to use these next two picks?
Yeah. I do. I love drafting young guys and letting them build together. That's just my personal preference, but I understand where you're coming from too.
Yeah, that's definitely, the Spurs way. And shoot, if Jeremiah Fears is here, man, even if he's not, like at that point at 14, dude, Nolan Traore, Jace Richardson, like you said, Asengi's over there too. Asengi would probably be a little bit redundant with the Cooper Flag pick. But like we said, if we want to trade back a little bit and get Danny Wolf or Sorber a little bit later, that's in the cards as well. But what I'll say is, if for some reason we do get the number one pick and the dream scenario happens, I think I would definitely be open to trading both of the other two picks and just bringing in, some established role player at whatever position of need.
I would too. I understand that part of it.
Any final thoughts for this episode, Ethan, before we wrap it up?
No, sir. I think this is a really good one. It was a lot of fun.
I agree. Tre Johnson, Kasparas Jakucionis, potential future Spurs. We'd love both of them, and we hope they're both on the board when the Spurs are on the clock, wherever that is.
Or we'll take Cooper Flag. That's also an easy cop out.
If we get the number one pick.
Yeah, right.
Well, if Cooper Flag's on the board at 8, that won't happen.
Yeah, we'll take him there too.
But we would as well. If you guys enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the channel, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. Look at the signed Keldon Johnson jersey. Bask in it. Bask in the Mustang right there. We appreciate y'all. We'll catch y'all later. See y'all later.